Thank you, Chairman, and thank you all of you for giving your time up to try and listen to me. My presentation is in some way a product of what I have learned and experienced in my 40 years of farming, actually this very year. I was lucky enough to do my basic farming with, as they say, probably the best farmer in Denmark. Interestingly, he grew cover crops and had a sound rotation. Having finished agricultural college in the late 1970s, which coincided with a massive move forward in the use of chemicals and the introduction of new varieties, it was an exciting time to be in farming. However, by the mid-1990s, this massive move forward had already started to slow down and stagnate. And I was beginning to look for answers. So together with some other like-minded people, a small discussion group was set up, and we discussed how we might prevent this yield plateau that we could see on the horizon. Our research took us all over Europe and UK, and we met with many innovative and inspirational people. With the support of that discussion group, I formulated a 7-year rotation commencing in the late 1990s, and it's still in use on the estate. Today, we take it up for discussion every year, but I can see no reason to change it, and hopefully I can convince you why I do not do that. As you will see in my presentation, I believe we have been able to move off this yield plateau. So I'm going to go through a little bit of a statistic, but also explain maybe why we do it. So we go straight into it. This looks very complicated, but it's not quite as complicated as it looked like. The 7-year rotation down the bottom, winter barley, oilseed rape, winter wheat, sugar beet, winter wheat or spring barley, all depends on the autumn, spring beans, human consumption, quality market, and winter wheat again. We have, over the years, integrated that with all the things we have learned and heard about now, soil and everything. We have, over the years, built it up to this. Organic manure, we try and introduce that 3 times in the rotation. Cover crops, we've now got in twice in the rotation, and you'll see later some results on that. The first preparation, could say certainly today old-fashioned, but we do believe in mulching of the surface, and we need to do that, and we to try and build up the biological activity and bacteria activity, and also it's probably the operation that prevents slugs more than anything else. And then we have also experimented with tine, so we try less soil disturbance. So we go with a wider point when we do the first preparation, and then we go a narrower point in the second one. So really what I'm trying to symbolize with this one, it's an integrated approach. And if anything that I have learned by my experience, I have been fortunate to meet a lot of interesting people. I've listened to them, and nothing of this have I probably invented myself, but I've been fortunate to meet all these good people. And that really is our backbone of it. And let me try and just symbolize that in another way. Cultivation cost is something people are driven by. I think we have got fixed cost is high, but they are needed, and we need to get our soil in a state. So we look at it, how do we spread the workload? How do we spread the fixed cost? And you can see that some crops takes more machinery and more cost, but it's the average that is really important. And you can follow the rotation down the bottom, and you will by now already say that he's paid very well by Vetterstat. That is not the case. We have been through a change of machinery over the years. We have recently gone full-hearted into this. But when I come back to the research program that is happening at the Salle estate, that is partly sponsored by Vetterstat. In that respect, they do not pay us for it, but they supply some machinery to try and experiment, and they give some help to try and calculate the machinery cost. So the machinery cost we're operating here, and I think that's important, it's the operators has got books where they keep records of timing and fuel use and capacity per hour, so quite a lot of study on its own goes on with that. And hence, that I'm not worried about the peaks as long as it fits in with the workload generally. Machinery, I'm not boring with this. For those of you who like tire kicking, we've got a couple of workhorses up the top, and you can see that our main drilling tractor I bought in 1999, and it's still going strong. And the Challenger, I was very lucky to buy secondhand from the States the day there was $2 to the pound, and that was one of the lucky ones. But it only can see small hours, but they can do it. A lot of people spent their depreciation on buying shiny tractors. We would rather look at the things behind. But really where we can reduce the fixed cost, long-term rotation, and we combine everything with one combine. We do not let ourselves get behind, so we are not afraid of hire a neighbor or something to finish off an off-laying field, but we can run it, so we start with winter barley, and we can take it all the way through to the beans. And you can see we do approximately 300 hours, drum hours on the combine a year. And sugar beet harvesting, my part-time job at Holcomb and the Rainham Estate and the Salle, we have started to see where we can complement each other. And one of the things we have got a sugar beet harvester between us, and that again, between 3 farms, again, to try where the real big fixed cost is and address them. A little bit, and say, you showed us this chart where you had a little simple machinery list of some 3 or 4 Vetterstat machines. We have got the old armory in the shed, so if it is that we feel that the extreme weather conditions or late lifted sugar beet and we need to go and do some plowing in the field, I have got no issue with it. I'm not religious in that respect. We have got to do what is right in the situation we are in. So hence, we have got big plow capacity, but that means that they can go out and plow land straight after. Here, this late autumn, trouble to get sugar beet up. But if we have lifted the sugar beet in the field one day, it is plowed before the operator go to bed the same day. We never ever let it be exposed to Mother Nature and some of that depreciation of an old second-hand plow I bought in 2000. So no more to do that. What have we achieved? And this is really one of the things that I cannot recommend more highly than having good records of what you've done in the past, because what you've done in the past is where you learn the most, and it's actually not reading, sorry, Jane, Farmers Weekly to say what should we do tomorrow. But we have got some statistics here of the eastern region and the England average wheat yields. And if I go back to this point about here, you will see where we were very parallel with the national and eastern of England. And then we changed the system, and you can see how our yields started to improve. And interesting enough, if you look back in 2003 and the top yields that was hit, how that hits the same line. So the stippled line on top is how our yields absolutely in a straight line. I'm fascinated by that, and that at the same time, the lower yields that we had in 2001, wet autumn, and then a wet spring. And again, in 2007, we had a very wet spring and a warm spring and lack of sunshine. And here we had this wonderful June in 2012 where we had lack of radiation and of it. And why was the high yields this year? This is a little work I've been doing with Niab and Jim Orson, who I have already respected. Why did we have the high yields? And there is some little work coming out that it was not only due to good farming, but we had a very colder than average North Sea, Atlantic, and we had some more sunshine, and that together probably increased the radiation by about 10%. But It is, I think, one of the things that I tried to show. The yields, I will tell you, is an average of that year's wheat harvest, so approximately 600 hectares in any year. We can prove the same in winter barley. I'm not going into detail. Oilseed rape, we have worked hard at for a few years. Spring barley, interesting crop that a lot more people are coming into. We would rather like to keep it for ourselves up in Norfolk, but we'll have to take the challenge up. And sugar beet, we were very poor sugar beet growers. You'll see over to the left, and we have been able to show that up. And again, no doubt that is really the best measure of the soil fertility. This one is really the one I would like to point out. This is our gross margins, and we can look back in the wonderful years of 2011 when we had good margins. But really what I would like to show with this graph, that any individual crop in the rotation is a relation to the other crop. So the reason we can get some high wheat yields is probably because we've got a sound rotation. The reason why we've got some good winter barley, because we know where it is in rotation, and the cultivation systems, techniques are tailored to the individual crop. And it's one of the things we are working more towards. And in the first slide, I showed how little we did to beanland. Beanland, when the land has had a good crop of spring beans, the less you do to it, probably the better it is. But in front of oilseed rape, we have got a lot of running around with spreaders and everything, and we have got to deep loosen it, and the root system benefit from it. So also to the gross margin. For me as a manager of 2 large farming operations, or 3, that is important that I've got a stable, sustainable business going forward. We do not look at an individual year as a financial year anymore. Our marketing is done certainly over 48, maybe 52 months of that particular marketing year. We've got long-term contracts, and that it's the average gross margin of all crops that counts. I frequently get asked, why do you not grow some more wheat if the wheat price go up, or if the rape price go down, why don't you cut it out and everything else? By the time I come to market it or have marketed, it actually is changed around, and for us it's not the troughs and the peaks. How quickly can you have an effect of it? 4 years ago I got involved in the Holcombe estate, and today Director of Farming. Holcombe estate, where Cook and Norfolk introduced a 4-course rotation 200 years ago, had got themselves in a situation that they had loaded the estate with every crop you could find under the sun. And fields had had up to 4 root crops and stone separators 4 out of 5 years. And when you come and have a meeting with the Earl of Leicester and Lord Cook, and they say, we once were, we would like to be again, and we think you can do it, so you got to go home and think about it, and then you come back with a big statement and said, 4-course rotation, I will create a 6-course rotation. So I did that, salad potatoes, oilseed rape, and sugar beet as break crops, and a cereal in between. And we are at the moment looking if we should extend it, because for the salad potatoes, for the fresh market, we see a big marketing opportunity if we can prevent nematodes and we have a more healthier soil, because we do accept that our pesticides is under observation and the retailers do not want to see it either, so we're trying to do it. But if you look over to 2011 was the harvest that I got appointed, and you can see we had wheat yields down to about 2 ton a hectare, and by actually 100% and nearly turning it over and go to a solid rotation principle straight away, you can see the increase we've been able to do over the last 4 years. One of the crops I was told we could not grow at Holcombe was winter barley, and if you can see how stable and increase it's been. Cook and Norfolk was famous for his livestock, for his cover crops. There were turnips or there were grass lays with clover. We have taken the same principles up there. We have this winter had 400 hectares of cover crops, and they are at the moment being grazed, or have over the winter been grazed by the estate's own beef herd and sheep herd. And we, on top of that, bought 1,000 store lambs out of Derbyshire and employed a shepherd just for 2 days a week to help the two we've got in the livestock department. And one of the big surprises we've had by having cover crop and non-inversion in front of sugar beet, our wild beet problem suddenly disappeared, and that was a really big eye-opener. At the same time, the yields we have been able to achieve talk for themselves, and I think it's fascinating that Cougar Norfolk, 200 years ago, we are now going back to it. All we have had big, heavy marketing departments of chemical companies and machinery manufacturers to undermine him, and now we go back to him again. We do grow some flowers. We have got HLS on all the farms, and we grow a lot of flowers, as you can see, and field martins, floristically enhanced martins. It's a great thing to make your farm more efficient, and it's a great thing in the public eye. We were one of the first farms to be part of catchment-sensitive farming. We were one of the pilot projects, and found it interesting. We are in one of the sub-catchments to the River Wensum. And then about 7 years ago, I got contacted again that therefore was setting up what they called a demonstration test catchments. There's 3 of them. There's one in Norfolk, there's one in Cumbria at the River Eden, and one at the River Avon in Hampshire. We have done it. So we have worked with UEA. It's run by 2 professors from UEA's environmental studies. I got a lot of negative comments from colleagues why I would open the estate to such an exposure to work with environmentalists. But today we have learned more from it, and the recent changes we've done in the estate is really done on the background on what we have learned through that. We are very pleased that we have got other research institutions come on board. We get a lot of information. We get very detailed weather statistics. We've got 3 full weather stations, and we get a rainfall not only per day. We can see how fast it comes. We can see how fast it goes through the profile. We can see how when it comes in the water. We can also see what it takes with it in the water, and I'll come back to that. The higher yields that we talk about this year, you will see what the research team Morton did. We had some average temperatures in the early summer, and then we had that lovely rainfall in May. And I think that is important for us going forward in the way we market our product and predict our harvest, that if we can start to pick some of those things up, it'll make us much better in the way we can market the product and expectations. I'm not dwell you with a lot of detail, but the whole catchment, they can see what area, what crop it's in, how many kilo of nitrogen is supplied to the whole catchment, phosphate, and over the years, and not bored with that. This one is quite interesting statistics that's come out, that really, if you have got your water table up to closer than 0.6 meters to the surface, that's really when you can lose your nutrients. So we try to be better in the way we apply our nutrients. The advantage by being part of such a research project, there is individual PhD students look at nutrients and bacteria and beetles and everything, and that's very exciting to take part of it, and interesting enough it all comes together. The other interesting that you see that even though there is a difference how much we supply in the whole catchment, they cannot detect it in the watercourse. I see that as a really advantage for UK agriculture. So when they come to redo RB 209, these are the kind of figures that will come in and help to influence the people. And that is a big statement that however proportional reductions in annual river in nitrite in and TP loadings were not observed at the sub-catchment outlet. Big statement. We can continue to have high input, high output farming without polluting the rivers if we have got the right measures and holding in the soil. Within the drain sampling site, we have got a trial area we took out, and I'll come back to that, at 140-something hectares in 3 blocks, no till, managed till and traditional till, and they can monitor how the water quality is coming of individual drains, because you see where the red triangles is, so they can monitor individual drains to see how the different systems react to it. And the fields to the left is BBRO, and Nottingham University has started to take part, and we have extended the trial area. It's going into beans and peas, and there we are experimenting with some cover crops that I'll also come back to. The trial area has now been in place for 4 years, and we have changed it slightly. And if you see over to the left, it's a traditional with a plow and a press and a drill. And the top right-hand corner was a direct drill. It was a seed hawk. We realized we had big issues with slugs. And slugs and protecting watercourses did not actually go hand in hand. So there was a compromise made. I was arguing the mulching effect to have a surface tills that could destroy and mix this in, and we had seen that in many ways is the best protection for slugs is that surface mulching. And one of the great inspirational people I ever met was Mr. Junest down in the Paris Basin, and the first thing he said, mulching. Harvesting, get the chop well and get the mulch created in the surface. That's where it all starts, and it must take place. And took me some years to get round to it, but we are now seeing it. So the no-till, we are still now a strip till, but we have accepted, and so has the research program, that we can put that mulching in the surface. It also helps us for volunteers when we change cropping. We could not grow winter barley after wheat if we didn't have that ability to get the germination of the wheat and get it sprayed off before we then strip till. And then we've got the managed system down, and there you can see a little bit of what it cost us, and they are real figures. Cover crop is an interesting part, and the project is heavily into it. We worked on cover crop now for 4 years on a scientific base. And one of some big statements is that we try different mixes. We have got to get the right mix in the rotation, because if we undermine our rotation by a brassica or anything, it could have big consequences. So the radish is the one that we've seen that's been able to hold the nutrients better than anything else, and as long as we can destroy it. We've also seen that how big a ground cover, you'll come statistics, if we can hold more by adding an organic manure to it before. So we are, as you'll see in front of sugar beet, we will spread turkey muck, and in one pass we will mulch it in and then have a biodrill and put the cover crop in. And we can, on that one, see here that if you look in the box, there is an advantage. So the nutrients we put in to the autumn crop or the cover crop can hold. And what we now hope that it'll release that obviously to the crop at the right time. And that is an important part of it. We get all sorts of statistics out of it, soil maps and everything else. And then this one, we obviously do some prices to it. And there you can see that what the yields were. In the James is the one where it's a traditional system. Poul is my system where I can do what I want. And then Lister is the no-till. And you can see a slight yield reduction, not a huge reduction, but the variable costs are up and the applications are up purely to control slugs and volunteers. And I think we should maybe be careful not to get too obsessed with saving cost of establishment cost and fixed cost, because it is important you get the output. And good old Einstein, I've always been one of my heroes. So, thank you.